How's it going, guys? So in this one we're going to be talking about the ocean modifier. It's really fun. Yeah, so this video is going to be about creating like an ocean water with the ocean modifier. So let's head to ocean, and obviously this only applies to users of the Pro or Ultimate version. So select that ocean water and add the water. And we're just going to scale this up by 50 and apply that scale and then mess with our solidify. So let's make our thickness 30 meters and our offset to 0. And that's looking fine. We're going to have to do a bit of manual work for this one. So we head into edit mode, select our plane. We're just going to subdivide that and we're going to do a number of cuts at, let's say, 60. And then we can head over to our modifier stack and add our ocean modifier. And you'll see that all of that stuff above the stack's gone. So we need to change the geometry from generate to displace. And that will now use the stuff before it. And we can see that if we mess around with the time, we can animate that. And it will keep our depth and things like that, which is vital for the actual water shader to work for its volume and things like that. So we've got our ocean modifier now applied, and we've got the sort of basics going on. A couple of things we need to do for the ocean modifier. We need to generate normals, and then turn the foam on, open the drop down, and type our foam data layer. So it's capital FOAM. And we're going to change our coverage to something like 0.35 for now. And we should see that foam now automatically generates on the surface. Don't need to do anything else inside the shader. From the shader now, we've got obviously our surface color, like in the other video. Swap between this ocean and a green ocean. Our foam types, ocean foam amount, so that'll increase the ocean foam amount. Ocean foam softness, so this will sort of softly spread it out so you get a bit more light foam across the surface. And ocean foam subsurface scattering, so that gives this just a bit more of a realistic look because it's allowing the light to come through the foam. But if we turn that off, you can see that we've just got this white foam and it renders a little bit quicker. And let's just reduce our foam down to 0.01 and 0.1 softness. Paint map, so this allows you to import texture paints, the dynamic paint animation stuff, so you can get like a boat going across the water and generating foam in its wake. All that you can use through the paint map, the manual paint map. Hide that light values again, like in the last tutorial, just how much dispersion you want to add to the water. Caustic type, whether it's going to be generated based on the geometry, which it is set to default with the ocean foam, or whether you're going to generate it based on like actual mask. As you can see there, we've got these things going on. The reason it's looking like that is because we need to go into our volume options, change our density to 1 and our deposit offset to something like 0, and that will give us less thick water at the top. And we've obviously got our hue, saturation and lightness values here. So if we go to something like deposit offset of 1, just so we can see this, and change our hue, we can see our hue is adjusting 0.55 and saturation of 1.5 and our lightness of 1.5. And then we can turn all that back off to go back to default and turn it all back on. And if we change our deposit offset back to something like 0.15, or even just 0, and then set our density to something like 0.5, we can see that we've now got a blue ocean with light shafts coming through. So let's change our caustic type back to the default 0. And let's increase our density back to 1 and turn our hue, saturation and lightness off. And now you can see that we've obviously got the waves generating, but we've also got some additional detail being generated. As you can see here, we've got this additional detail map generated, because if we don't have that on, let's have a look. Where is it? Ripple intensity, there it is. Set that to 0. It will just be flat, and you'll probably want to shade smooth. And if we increase our ripple intensity, something like 2, you can see that we're adding more ripples to that. You can turn the ocean ripples off also just by that slider. And ocean foam displacement, we can increase that, and that'll physically displace where the foam is. So something like 0.5 is fine. If we set that to 0, you can see that it won't actually displace the foam, but it's nice to have a little bit of displacement going on because obviously foam is a thing on top of the surface of the water. So how do we go about making this look a little bit better? So the first thing you want to do is obviously we've got the solidify and subsurface modifiers on. So we'll just increase the viewport to 2 for now, to see how that's looking. And you can see that the foam does generate a little bit more information. If we crank this to something like 4, let it do its thing, you can see that our foam is now a lot higher resolution. But we also need to change the resolution for the viewport. So if we set that to something like 20 and the render to something like 30, resolution of our foam and ocean and everything just gets a little bit better. And we can change our levels viewport back down to something like 2 now and increase our render to 4. And then a couple of other things that we want to address first is obviously the amount of waves that's going on here. So if we physically scale a mesh up, so let's scale it by 10 and apply that scale, then more waves will naturally happen within that area because of what is set up here and here, the spatial size. Oh, ooh, and the size. So I'm just gonna scale that back down. We can adjust these values here too. So if we adjust the size, you can see that that makes the size of the waves bigger and or smaller. And if we adjust the spatial size, this gives more of a, this treats the area like a domain and says like, okay, so how big are we treating the distance of this domain? So if we reduce this down to smaller values, we can see that we're getting more stuff compacted into this area. I'm not really sure of the logic of this value, but I just know that smaller means more and higher means less. And obviously when you increase the amount of waves that are being generated, then you will naturally get more displacement from those waves and more foam across them. So if we head back up to our foam types and we increase the amount of ocean foam to something like 0.25, we can see that we're going to see more foam getting generated. And if we increase the softness up to something like 0.5, we can see that we've got now more crests. So more foam is obviously going to generate on that area. And then just messing around with these values. Again, these are sort of artistic values. It's what you want to make. So messing around with these values will determine how much foam and things generate. If you find that you're getting too much foam generating and you can't adjust it enough with these values, just adjust it with this value. Oh, hide that over. Spectrum, this will change the ocean type. Established oceans are generally regarded as the larger ocean. So if you want to do larger ocean shots, you would use the established ocean, and you just sort of scale your waves down a little bit more, something like 0.5, and not much foam will generate across these. So if we open up our foam, turn that on, And then, oh, sorry, 0.5. You can see that not much foam is actually generating across this ocean type, and even if we increase this value all the way up, oh, it's more of a blanket than it is a peaks, which is kind of annoying. So if we reduce our softness all the way down, you can see that we're not really getting a good in between, unless we go really high resolution, and that will just annihilate your computer. So established ocean with sharp peaks, again, same thing, but you just sharpening your peaks up. And the fetch, I'm not exactly sure what that does, but we can see with the sharper peaks we're getting a bit more or less overall coverage with the foam. Again, you probably need to adjust these settings here, so like spatial size. Oh, let's go to 50 and then increase the size physically all the way up, and you can see that we have got foam in specific areas, but again, you're going to really high values to get around this, and that's still a lot of foam being generated. And even if we reduce that to something like 0.5, it just kind of disappears. But I suppose, in a way, foam doesn't generate on oceans the way we all seem to think it does anyway. So you don't, I suppose you don't necessarily need, all that foam all the time, because that looks nice as it is without the foam. And then the last ocean type is just shallow water. And to be quite fair, I'm not entirely sure what this does. It doesn't seem to address or change anything like the first two did. So we'll just head back to turbulence, set this back down to 1, set that back down to 35. And have a look. Yeah, we got a load of foam now. Cool. Set that to 0.15. And set that to 0.35. So I can adjust how much foam I can actually see. 0.25 and softness of 0.5. There we go. And now, obviously, the final stage is to animate all of this. So we do this with the time value. Let's head back to our first frame. So if you're not there already, just shift and left on the D-pad will put you back in your first frame. And we're going to hover over the time value, press I on our keyboard to add a keyframe in. And then we're just going to jump up like 30 frames. So that's just shift and up on your D-pad 3 times. And we're just going to set this to something like 8. And press I again. And then when you try and animate this, you'll see it starts off slow, gets really fast, and then slows down again. So to address this, we need to change the interpolation. So T, while your mouse is in the whatever, what is this? Timeline? Timeline. Duh. Change it to linear, and then Shift and E, and then we're going to do linear extrapolation, and that will just pull these 2 keyframes and make them infinite. So if we view this now, we can see that it's a steady pace all the way, and then when we get past that keyframe, we can see it will carry on indefinitely. So we've now got that animated. So you probably just want to animate between like 1 and 8 over 30 frames per second. Over 30 frames. If we go to something like 15 and change that, you don't need to adjust any of this anymore. It'll keep all of the keyframe information, but it's a lot faster. So I would just stick with 8. 1 and 8 over 30 frames. And now we can start to fine tune things like how much height we want our waves to have. So we just come here and increase the scale if we wanted to. We can make them choppier if we wanted to. And then align our waves. So if you want your waves to go into a, if you want your wave, right, so if you want your waves to physically move, as you can see at the minute, they're just kind of sloshing in the same place. So we've got this same action happening here. For your waves to move in a direction, you need to use alignment. Now if we use alignment, we can see that our waves are now moving in this direction. And we can change the direction in degrees, how much these are going to move. And we probably need to bring our choppiness down to something like 1 for now. But we don't want it all like this. We want to break it up a little bit. So we can put this down to something like 0.75. Change the direction to 45 degrees. And you can see that you're still getting this slosh motion. So if we change that to something lower, you can see that the slosh motion is more dominant. And then as we move that up, the actual direction is more dominant now. But if we have it all the way to 1, it's just peaks appear, move, and then fall off as they hit the end of the mesh. So I'd say your alignment wants to be something around like 0.5, 0.6, so that you can see this undulation in the waves, and that the actual peaks will fall back in and then regenerate. And that will also generate some foam too. You probably won't see it right now, because what we need to do is we need to increase the levels of the viewport render, because the foam is now generating across the peaks rather than what it was earlier. And we're going to want to increase our foam generation to something like 0.5 and change the foam that we generate here to something like 0.3. And as you can see now, we've got foam generating across the tops of these waves. And obviously if we reduce the softness or something, it won't be so uniform across. We can see now that we've just got it on the actual peaks. But yeah, if you decide to use alignment, you will have to adjust the amount of foam that's generated, because it changes for some reason. So now we've got an animated ocean, and I've got it on 4 subdivisions in the viewport, which is not going to animate. So I'll animate a bit better now. Yep. And obviously we want to pick a nice shot to render this out in. So let's add a camera in. Let's just control and numpad 0 and adjust where our camera is going to be. So I use the fly walk mode. And let's have a quick look. Here we go. I want to generate a little bit more foam, so let's select our water. Let's go to foam amount and put that to 0.5. And I want to set this to 0.1. I just want it to be a little bit softer. So we don't need to use adaptive subdivision like we do with the other waters in this. We can just go ahead and render. And there we go, guys. We've got a render of our ocean modifier shader with the foam and the subsurface scattering coming through the foam and all of our light penetration and volume underneath. There we go. We can see some light coming through there. All for a very pleasing render. If you do get some of these little black spots, this is just where the choppiness is a little bit too high, so you might need to reduce the choppiness in the ocean modifier just here. And bear in mind, you won't see this very well unless you've got your subsurface modifier enabled and your viewport resolution is the same as your render resolution. And that's it. That's our ocean shader for the ocean modifier. If you find that your animation is moving a little bit too slow or a little bit too fast, you can grab the end keyframe just by box selecting. So deselect everything and just box select the last keyframe, and you can just G and move it along closer to the first keyframe, and this will speed up, or we can move it further away and this will slow down our water. And because we've got the linear interpolation running for infinity, moving these 2 keyframes won't affect where the animation stops, so this will just keep on going and ongoing and ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. So that's that one, guys. So anyone with the Pro or the Ultimate version of True Terrain obviously has access to this. If you've got any comments or any questions, just drop me a comment down in the section below. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you're not already, and Come and join us on our Discord community where we share tips and tricks all the time, and the community is very active. So yeah, I will see you in the next one.